Welcome to Windows on the World, bringing you cutting-edge news, empowering information, and no conspiracy theories. On tonight's show,
I'd like to talk for a minute about an issue that's getting more and more attention. That's the issue which scientifically is called stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, also called the chemtrail issue.
Could a strange substance found by a southwest Arkansas man be part of a government test? Well, that's the question at the heart of a phenomenon called chemtrails, now getting widespread attention.
Well, they say the government is dumping chemicals on us to control or manipulate the weather.
And they say the unusual-looking jet trails in the sky are actually chemical-laden chemtrails.
The survival of the human race, literally, is at stake. The physical survival, the level of health that people will enjoy, the survival of the planet. If you're concerned about the environment, this is your issue. And yet most people have no idea that it's even going on.
It is called geoengineering, fighting global warming by putting a chemical dust in the atmosphere and reflecting harmful radiation back into space.
You could use barium oxide, for example, which makes big fluffy clouds. You could use tiny little bits of aluminum, which is benign in the environment, and essentially manage the climate.
That is not rain, that is not snow. Believe it or not, military aircraft flying through the region is dropping chaff. Small bits of aluminum, sometimes it's made of plastic or even italicized paper products, but it's used as an anti-radar issue, and obviously they're up there practicing. Now, they won't confirm that, but I was in the Marine Corps for many years, and I'll tell you right now, that's what it is.
And tonight, one woman says the government's own data shows the chemicals are showing up in our drinking water.
so Michael Murphy made two films, What in the World Are They Spraying and Why in the World Are They Spraying. His website is whyintheworldaretheyspraying.com, and Michael joins us now. Hello, Michael.
Good afternoon or good morning, Mark, depending on where we're from. How are you doing?
Well, we're okay over here. We're still suffering from geoengineered skies, and particularly bad in the southeast, which is London, where I live. I live in actually northeast London, and the spraying program does seem to be ongoing. Now, I was going to speak to you well over a year ago on my very first show on the People's Voice TV, and we didn't manage to hook up, but we've managed to get in touch recently. And you made both films with G. Edward Griffin. What in the world are they spraying and why in the world are they spraying? So can you give us a few updates on what's happened since those films have been made?
Well, both of the films were very popular. And in 2010, it was, I call it an assignment by God, because everything literally came together. I was not even a filmmaker. I didn't even know how to make films. And it started with a borrowed camera, after I wrote an article called What in the World Are They Spraying? And literally after I wrote that article, people started sending me, plane tickets to come in and investigate. They wanted to share what they've learned. And that film was instrumental in waking up the world. It was translated into several different languages and literally reached millions of people. And it was said to have started movement around the world. So it was very effective in doing that. But after that film, the question, a lot of people had the question of why are they doing this? And there are a number of reasons for chemtrail geoengineering programs. A lot of things that can be accomplished by putting aerosols into the sky. But we focused on probably the most obvious and the most easily thing that people can relate to, and that's our weather. And many people are aware that our weather is dramatically changing. Well, there's no question, and even from the mouths of geoengineering, that weather can be modified and controlled, and thus temperatures can be altered, manipulated. And I just released an article, which hopefully we'll talk about, by putting particles and nanoparticles into our sky. So we focused on weather control and why in the world are they spraying, which can be found at whyintheworldaretheyspraying.com, has won over 14 awards. That film was very effective in terms of reaching a worldwide audience, and now people are finally starting to address this issue. So we've seen a lot of very positive things coming out of both of the films. So very happy about that.
Yes, and there are still people saying it's a conspiracy theory, but that number is diminishing. I mean, I hear from people who are talking to people in the street about it that more and more people are aware of it, and that is obviously a very good thing. The problem we've got is it seems to be on a huge scale. It's done under the United Nations. There's a huge amount of money involved in all this, and it appears quite a lot of secrecy. However, at a recent geoengineering conference, Max Bliss reported that he went there and talked to several scientists who let slip a few things about this program, but it still seems to be quite hierarchical in the respect that there's a few people at the top who seem to know what's going on, and the rest of people are kind of got this consensus mentality and just believe what they're told. Now, how are you finding this is panning out in the States? What's the sort of global awareness now, or the awareness in the States and people who come to you compared to about 5 years ago when these films were in production?
The awareness has grown exponentially. When I first came into this, it was like trying to sell it was like trying to sell ice cubes to an Eskimo. It was a very, very challenging, because it is so difficult and challenging for people to realize and actually accept the fact that this is going on and has been going on for a very long time, right above their head, without people knowing about it. So we have seen, again, a dramatic increase in terms of awareness. A recent study by, I believe, geoengineer David Keith or somebody related to him indicated, this was released about a year and a half ago, that we are at about 8% global awareness. Now, the number, what is considered to be critical mass, or the percentage of a population that is needed to make an issue that you're presenting to become common knowledge amongst society, is 10%. So we're very, very close, and probably within a couple of tenths of a percentage point of that number, because that study was about a year and a half old. So the awareness is growing. I have found, because I've traveled, we screened Why in the World Are They Spraying at the European Union in Belgium. I've been to Washington, D.C. a number of times and discussed this issue with a lot of state senator, county representatives, of course. And what in the world are they spraying? Many of our members of Congress and Senate literally ran when they heard the issue of geoengineering. However, the awareness is growing, but it is much greater for some reason in Europe. So my goal is to really activate people, not only in Europe, around the world, to hit the streets, to get active. We have both films available for free on YouTube. So What in the World Are They Spraying and Why in the World Are They Spraying? Please get this message out on social media. Utilize your email list, any list that you can, because we're, again, very close to critical mass. And the dynamics of the movement, the dynamics in terms of what we have been working towards, are about to dramatically change, because we, once you hit that number of 10%, this is going to change. It's going to be a game changer. And we have a chance at stopping these programs. And the reason I say that, they've been ongoing for a number of years, and we estimate probably since maybe even the 40s and 50s, seem to have been ramped up to about full-scale deployment probably in the late 90s. However, these programs are not legal, so they have been doing this. And what they're doing is calling for, quote-unquote, an emergency, climate emergency. And what they are saying, it's ironic, because we have millions of people marching in the streets around the world demanding that our legislators take action against this supposed climate emergency. Very few of them, I believe, are aware that geoengineering is the next step. And what they're doing is selling these plans as a means to mitigate global warming. So the idea is putting metal particulate in the sky to reflect sunlight back into space and thus cool the planet. That's a cover story. Again, there are a number of objectives, hopefully we'll get into during this interview, that can be accomplished But the most effective and quickest thing to do is to move forward with geoengineering programs. So a lot of people don't realize they're marching to really poison themselves. So that's why it's really important to get out there and educate your audience, whether it be 10 people, 10 million people. We need to get this message out. And both films have been a very effective tool for doing that.
Yes, and the problem is that the key environmental groups like Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace will not address this issue at all. People have really tried to get them on board and to look at the evidence, and they simply won't do it because they're co-opted into this idea of climate change and global warming. Interesting that you mentioned David Keith. I saw Ian Hume and David Keith doing their good cop, bad cop bit at the University of Oxford Union. And there were several people in the audience, including Max Bliss, and we did question them. I think Max had a run-in with David Keith again recently, but there is actually a news report where David Keith gets called out, which I've actually put into this interview. Have you seen that? It was on American TV.
It depends on which one. I've seen a number of them, and I'm grateful for all activists, especially Max Bliss. You know, he's going right into the devil's den. But if you could describe the interview where he was called out.
Yes, it was basically the guy was saying, so you're going to spray sulfuric acid into the atmosphere, and that's a good idea?
That was actually, that was the Colbert report.
Yes, that's right, yes.
You know, I hate to say it, but it was hilarious. And Colbert brought, you know, a very deep, dark issue and brought humor into this issue. And I think that's a very effective way to reach this, because sometimes, I'll tell you, when you address this day after day after day, it's very challenging not to get angry, but we have to keep our balance. We can't get angry. So I think it was brilliant in terms of how he addressed this. And yeah, I posted that video, you know, several times, maybe 20 times already. And I think it was brilliant. Just another method to reach the masses.
Absolutely correct. And it's interesting you also said that it's illegal, because under the Environmental Modification Treaty of 1978, it is illegal. And all this is being done through the United Nations. Now, the United Nations is actually a big spider organization, and by their own admission and in their own treaty, they are above and beyond international law.
Well, that's interesting, and they believe they're above and beyond international law. What with that treaty? It was the Enmod Treaty, and in that treaty, it banned weather control or weather modification from being used during wartime purposes. The loophole. We interviewed Dr. Nick Begich for Why in the World Are They Spraying? He discussed the loophole in that law. And the loophole was this: countries can use weather control over their own land. So when you're modifying weather, it's very effective to start modifying a storm several thousand miles away. And within that, you can either deplete a storm or you can build a storm. And, you know, as it moves every 100 miles, it can pick up moisture. You can build a storm, whether it's by using RF technology, you know, building moisture into a storm. We can get into the mechanics of that. But, you know, when you start building a storm, it doesn't get above, you know, a country border and say, whoa, 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 there's a treaty here. You know, it fails to recognize that. So that storm moves on. And of course, so it's questionable whether they're violating the law in terms of that specific law. However, what we do know is what they're doing is illegal. It's violation of our rights. People now are showing up with the primary ingredients of geoengineering programs in their blood. You know, these ingredients, the footprint of aluminum, barium, and strontium, God knows what else they're putting up. They're putting up many different things into our atmosphere. It's showing up in rain tests around the world thousands of times, the percentage points. And again, it's showing up in blood tests around the world. So we've had a number of human health implications. You wouldn't believe how damaging this is. Respiratory mortality went from number 6 down to number 3 in a very short period of time. We've had aluminum-related illnesses go through the roof. And aluminum, again, it's the primary ingredient in geoengineering programs. It's extremely toxic to vegetation, to our forests, and you know, it's really hampering our ability to grow natural organic foods. And we covered that extensively in Why in the World Are They Spraying?
You certainly did. And I have in front of me a certificate of analysis from a company who did a rainwater test in southwest London, and the aluminium is at 88, which is Ug/L, barium 10, strontium 10, titanium 10, manganese 3, iron 56, interestingly, copper 10, zinc 17, arsenic and sulfates very low in there, which you'd expect in rainwater. But that rise of aluminium is unusual, and they could not really find any way of kind of quantifying why that is. So the information is out there, and this nanoparticulate aluminium is being found in soils, and that was brought out very much in your film. Can you expand on that a bit, on the work of the Carnicom Institute?
Yeah, the Carnicom Institute has done just a wonderful job. They get more into Morgellons, so I really haven't focused in that area, although I think it's equally, if not, just as important. It's very important, but we focus more on the weather control, weather modification. So, as I stated, so when we went to the geoengineering conference, this was back again in 2010, we released When the World Valley Sprain. Very quickly, everything that I had been seeing in the sky, for a number of years, I got interested in what I knew as the chemtrail issue, but had very little information in terms of what it was. So it was interesting because I was at home in Los Angeles, and somebody called me and they said, "Hey, do you want to go to a geoengineering conference?" And I had already released one film, my first film called Environmental Deception, about the chemtrail issue. And I said, "Yeah, I'm really not interested in that. I really feel led to address this chemtrail thing." And they said, "Geoengineering is chemtrails. This is the scientists talking about it." So, make a long story short, they influenced me to go. And during that conference, I was shocked. I heard scientists, geoengineers talking about ways to disperse, these chemicals into our sky from airplanes, exactly what we're seeing. And then they spoke about a lot of the consequences, and which we'll get into in a second. But aluminum, the idea of putting aluminum in the sky, according to geoengineers, for the stated goal of blocking the sun. So what they're stating is aluminum is highly reflective. It's very lightweight. So if you put nanoparticles in, create an artificial cover into our sky, it will reflect sunlight back into space. And, it is effective. You'll notice during a hot sunny day, when the planes start coming, they're building that wall, they're building the canopy over. You can feel the temperature drop about 7 or 8 degrees. So that's very common. However, what we covered in Why in the World Are They Spraying? A number of studies from Stanford and even NASA indicate that putting aerosols will at night block the heat, trapping the heat, and thus raising the temperature. We've seen nighttime highs go up considerably, since these programs have been ramped up. But getting back to it, so their idea was putting aluminum, which again is very toxic, not only to our environment but human health, would be a very effective metal to put up into our sky. So from that, I went around the country and went around the world. We even went into Belgium. And like we said, the primary ingredients that geoengineers deny they're putting up but state they urgently want to, which is aluminum, barium, and strontium, we're finding in rain tests literally from around the world. Hundreds of people after the first film was released started taking rain tests. But people also started taking blood tests and hair analysis, and they're finding the same geoengineering chemtrail footprint in their hair, in their blood. And these are fine nanoparticulates, so every time we breathe, they go right into our lungs. Typically, we have our body has reinforcements so that these will not get into our brain, such as the blood-brain barrier. These are 1/10 of a micron. They pass right past the blood-brain barrier. Now we have Alzheimer's, people in their 40s who are showing signs of Alzheimer's. A lot of negative consequences associated with aluminum. But the forests, that's, also a big concern because the scientists up in Northern California, Francis Mangels, he started noticing that in the area, beautiful area up there, and typically they have an acidic soil in Northern California, but he started noticing that the trees were starting to die. And he's a gardener as well, and he was not able to get the yields that he was supposed to get. So as the scientist, as the biologist that he is, he started testing the pH, and he found pH changes just astronomical. He found that instead of having an acidic soil, the pH was changing to alkaline. So that's when he went ahead and started taking the rain test, he found the aluminum. Aluminum will make a soil alkaline. It will make rain alkaline. And then he, of course, was looking for sources of that, and that's where we sourced and linked this to geoengineering. So it's very interesting, but also very concerning.
Well, it is, and I remember seeing a document years ago. It's the Regulation of Geoengineering, and that is a House of Commons Science and Technology Committee document from 2009-2010. This program has been going on a long time. Weather modification has been going on for the best part of 100 years, and there is much documented evidence of that. But the most disturbing aspect of this in some respects is that it is now being done by what they call stakeholders. So we've got private companies very involved who were involved in things like cloud seeding, apparently getting involved in this.
You better believe it. As we covered in Why in the World Are They Spraying? These are, I would say, the most effective programs in terms of consolidating an enormous amount of both monetary and political power into the hands of a few. Of course, that's at the expense of all of us. And let's get back to aluminum. Okay, we're finding aluminum everywhere. Why aluminum? And of course, geoengineers are stating aluminum is highly reflective. It's lightweight. But what we found, it's also a very effective conductor. So we noticed ahead of storms, 12 hours, 24 hours ahead of storms, we'd see this heavy trailing, and then boom, intense flooding, intense lightning. Our atmosphere is very, very conductive now because it has all this aluminum. So we have these intense lightning storms, thus more forest fires and everything else. But what they do, they put this aluminum, this canopy of aluminum up, and then with either the HARP system or RF technology, just like a microwave, they have the ability to heat that metal up. And when you heat metal up, what does it do? It rises. And when it rises, it creates a vacuum, low pressure vacuum, and you can steer storms into one area, or the case of what we have now, out of areas, and we have this polar vortex, and it's an artificial polar vortex, very much believed to be from geoengineering programs. So again, they spray that metal, heat it up, and jet streams can be diverted. So what they're doing right now, if you look at California, the jet stream is missing where it normally and naturally comes in. It's diverting up into the Arctic, and I'd like to talk about why I think they're doing it. So it's going into the Arctic, bringing warm air into the Arctic. Of course, that's rebounding. It's coming down right down into the Midwest, where I have been for about 10 months. So it's been very cold. We've had extensive precipitation here, and of course, lower temperatures, but they have high pressure in California, artificially high pressure. I believe this is about the resources in that area. And of course, they're experiencing major droughts. Geoengineering programs do create drought because when you put metal particulate into the sky, the water molecules that should adhere to other water molecules are adhering to this metal particulate or whatever else they're putting, and instead of falling as rain, it drifts. But eventually it does fall. What goes up, what comes down. So we're seeing extensive droughts in one area, floods in other areas, such as the Midwest and other areas. But if you look back to the summer of 2012, we had intense drought in California, Midwest, but Europe, where you are, had intense flooding, and that's because they were droughting out the Midwest. Why? Now, why would anybody want to do this? Well, we don't have to look too far. There's a company called Bechtel. Bechtel owns about 82% of the privatized water. So in the case of California, it's related to this issue of Agenda 21. So anytime there's a shortage, these companies are going, oh my God, we have to form public-private partnerships, PPPs, and take control of this water because, of course, there's not enough of it to go around. So that's their excuse. And again, these quote-unquote elites, I like to call them many different things, but because we're on the air, we'll just call them elites. Or, I don't even want to go there. But they have stated publicly many times that water is the next valuable resource that they would like to control. And of course, if you control the rain, if you control the water, you can literally control the planet. And that's what they're doing. So I believe that California, and there are a number of issues, it's also related to world government, and it's also related to our crops. And the Central Valley of California, just about 5 years ago, provided 50% of the fruits and vegetables for the nation, for the United States of America. And what they did, using Agenda 21, they used the scarcity or their belief that the delta smelt would become extinct, so they shut the water off to the farmers into the Central Valley. Of course, what did that do? Because they're not getting natural rain, it put a lot of farmers out of business. And what that did in terms of the global market, in terms of the United States and being independent, it made us interdependent on other countries for our fruits and vegetables. And when you have a global marketplace, of course, this is where they're moving into this global government. So if you're getting food from Chile or whether it be, Iraq, what their excuse is to set up global governance to monitor this. And I believe that that's a major part of it. But moving on to this polar vortex, it was interesting because I was looking back at the history. And back in the 70s, today we have this huge campaign going on trying to convince everybody that CO2 is causing global warming and we're in this runaway meltdown. And scientists are sourcing the Arctic melt in terms of, and I know that's questionable whether the Arctic's melting or whether it's not. I'm not saying, it is. I'm not sure. However, we do know it has melted. It appears to be coming back. But in the 70s, this scientist named Stephen Schneider, very important and part of the IPCC, he was coming out and he said that he was concerned about an ice age. And Schneider said this ice age is going to completely cripple us. It's going to be a national security threat. So we have to look at ways to melt the Arctic. How would they do this? Well, he suggested a couple of things. He suggested spraying black soot on the Arctic. What does black soot do? Well, of course, when you put black coating over ice, it's going to absorb more sunlight. We're going to have dramatic melting. We have pictures of the Arctic. Guess what? It looks like it's paved with blacktop. It's completely black, even today. So he also spoke, and there's a reason why they would want to melt the Arctic, which we'll get into. So just bear with me, and we'll get through this. They also discussed destroying our ozone in those areas. And the way that they can do that and the way that they spoke was by putting chlorine into the sky. And chlorine destroys our ozone. Guess what? We have a major ozone hole right over the Arctic. So the sun is much stronger and thus it can melt the ice. They also spoke about detonating nuclear bombs. Nuclear bombs have intense heat. Yes, they will melt ice if you put them in an ice region. There have been 103 nuclear bombs detonated by Russia in the Arctic. They had said it was because of seismic issues and also mapping, but, it definitely was done. So, yes, there was ice melt. And now we look at, they definitely have the ability to divert jet streams. We have this polar vortex going up into that region, of course, bringing warm air. That will melt the ice. Why would they want to do that? Doesn't make sense. Yes, it does. And I'll tell you why. There are 13% of the world's oil. 13% of the world's oil is below that ice. Shell oil, along with the U.S., Japan, and Russia, has stated their intent to get that oil. All of those countries have also deployed their militaries into that region, and it looks like what they're doing is staking claim as becoming the world's superpower in that region. So we have and I put in an article. This is a very important article. It's Geoengineering and the Deliberate Melting of the Arctic. I'll repeat it again. Please Google this. Geoengineering and the Deliberate Melting of the Arctic, where I address this and I cover documentation. Those countries also have spoken about their interest in the shipping lanes in that area, and they've actually started shipping now that some of that ice has melted. I think some of it's come back, but they've started obtaining some of that oil, and they've started utilizing that shipping lanes. And the idea is, because those shipping lanes are very important, it would cut costs, would cut down on oil, and it would be very effective in terms of having the country have control over that area. So it's interesting because we have, again, scientists who are saying, sourcing this Arctic ice melt as proof of global warming. What they want to do is bring in this cap and trade and really bring in, they want to tax us to death. Bottom line, this is a big scam. It's a scam, and it is to take our money. It is to take our freedom. And I think most of all, it's to create global governance and to bring in and make illegal geoengineering programs legal. And we may be going into a cooling into a cooling period, we may. And if we're going into a cooling period, I think that they want to make these programs legal so that they can say, look what we have done. Look, we've cooled the planet. Even though geoengineering has a number of negative consequences, look, we've cooled the planet. Now, I don't have proof on that, and I want to be very clear. I don't know if the planet's warming, if it's cooling. We don't know what it's doing, nor can we even come up with a definitive answer until geoengineering stops, because the planet is not in its natural cycle, and that is very, very important. So don't tax me to death. Don't take away my freedoms. Don't take away the Constitution based on the fact that you're saying CO2 is causing global warming. Stop geoengineering, and then we'll sit down at the table. And I think that's very important.
I think that's very interesting, Michael, what you've just said there. So it's just brought something to mind. That is it possible that these people in 5 years' time will say, okay, yes, we were geoengineering 5 to 10 years ago, but look at the result. Do you think that's where it's going?
We've seen it time and time and again. We have seen it time and time and again. So, of course, they're not going to admit that they destroyed forests around the world, that they destroyed our ozone layer. They're not going to admit that so many deaths were attributed to this. They're going to say, look what we did. It was something so good that we have to tell you. And that's where they're going with this, and they're using a fear tactic, stating that global warming is just out of control and everyone's going to die unless they put these chemicals into our sky. Let me get one thing straight. Geoengineering is not about saving anyone. It's not about saving anything. It is about consolidating monetary and political power into the hands of the few at the expense of every living thing on our planet. So don't buy in to this system, this demonic system based on lies. They're not working for us. And this is my air. This is my air. This is your air. This is everybody's air. And we have a right to drink clean water, eat clean food, and breathe clean air. And they have taken it upon themselves to remove that. So it is literally the battle of life and death on this planet, because it's the natural life and death on this planet. And I don't say that in a fearful way, because I think that fear is very debilitating, and it's not, the opposition uses fear in order to manipulate us into accepting certain things. But the reason I say it is, instead of looking at this in a fearful way, let's look at this as an opportunity, because we've had this oppressive system, that's been building, growing, developing, and they're very close to achieving their objectives. However, one thing, people are waking up. And again, when we spoke about critical mass, we're very close to reaching critical mass. And when we hit that, it's going to be a game changer. And when we collectively stand up, which we will, and we are doing, and say, we will not accept this. We do not buy in to the lie of global warming. We're not buying into it. Stop the geoengineering, then we'll sit down and talk. Stop the geoengineering. Then we'll sit down and talk. And when we collectively do it, we will stop. And their agenda will stop. And the global government will stop. And the oppression will stop. The starving. We have thousands of children every hour dying in Africa because of starvation. And that's due to the drought, which is being used and manipulated by geoengineering. Stop killing our people. This is our planet. We will not have it.
That's absolutely right, Michael. And brilliantly well said. I speak to Deborah Tavares and people in California, and we've actually reported about the water wars. We cover every aspect of Agenda 21, and I speak about it pretty much every week on the show, because it affects every part of people's lives, down to a very local level with their local authorities. And it goes out like a spider's web. We have change agents put into our communities at every level to try and get this agenda through. And children in school are taking exams on climate change. It's very, very difficult now. There isn't much time left either, I don't think, to try and get this agenda sorted out, because it seems to be very, very far advanced from what I can see.
Mark, let me tell you something. Okay, they have put in billions of dollars. They have armies going out. Obama, back in December, started his climate re-education campaign. Re-education campaign. Think about this. And what he's doing, he's working with 12 or 14 governors and mayors from cities all around America that they're objective is to go out into local municipalities and re-educate people about climate change so that people buy into this campaign. Listen, I grew up in Chicago. I know a scam very well when I see it, and this thing stinks to high heaven, okay? This thing stinks to high heaven. So they're coming out, of course, sourcing, again, geoengineering, Arctic melt as being, proof of CO2, and that's a lie. It's the Hegelian dialectic. Hey, we're having a coming ice age. And this guy Schneider, right, back in the 70s, coming ice age, we have to melt the Arctic. The Arctic starts melting. 10 years later, back in the 80s, Schneider reversed his stance and said, oh my God, the Arctic is melting. This is all documented. These are not my words. He said, oh my God, the Arctic's melting. We have global warming. So he led the charge with the IPCC, and he was an advisor from every president, I believe from Nixon all the way up to Obama. He mysteriously died, as a number of other scientists involved with these types of issues did back, I believe it was a year ago. So he just died, I think, in 2013 or 2012. But at any rate, it's the Hegelian dialect, problem, reaction, solution. So they melted the ice, no question about that. And then Source said, oh my God, the ice is melting. It's global warming. We have to tax you. We have to create world government. We have to consolidate all this monetary and political power into the hands of the few. It's a lie. And we don't even know. The ice definitely melted. And there's talk, and I'm not sure if I believe it or not, but there's talk about this big methane release. And I have come to realize that when ice melts, also methane can be released. And methane could create a major problem. But again, we don't know because we can't determine if the planet is warming or not. We definitely have climate change. But let me tell you something. One of the major causes, and there are probably, 50, maybe less, but quite a few different factors that go into changing the climate. But I can guarantee you geoengineering is the number one cause. And that's the key. And it's very important that we recognize this. So when we bang the drum and say it's this or that, there are many different factors. And again, until the geoengineering is stopped, we can't determine what's going on. So don't move forward politically. Do not scam the world of trillions of dollars. Global warming is a potential multi-trillion dollar industry. But again, the objective from hundreds of years ago was to move into this global government system. And this is the perfect thing. And of course, geoengineers state, when we do geoengineering, whose hand would be on the thermostat? We can't allow a country like Iran to have their hand on the thermostat. There would be wars fought over this. So we have to, again, consolidate power and create global governance. Let me be clear about this. Whose hand should be on the thermostat? No one's, okay? This is God's. This is nature's. Nature. Our planet has a natural system. It has a number of backups to continue in balance. And when you push and pull it, it's not going to work. There are going to be repercussions. And this is not working well, and it's not going to work. And people need to wake up. They need to see the severity of this, but also the opportunity. And again, we have an opportunity. We are the ones that have been called, and we have a wonderful opportunity because this issue, it literally affects each and every person, every living thing on the planet. So for the first time, we've had an issue collectively, a commonality for all human beings on the planet where we can collectively stand up. And this is the big one. There are a number of issues that I'm concerned about, a number of them. But this one is the tip of the iceberg. And when we address it, when we stop these programs, we can regain the natural balance on the planet, and we will.
Absolutely, Michael. I'm just going to read out this. This is from the opening statement from Mark Lawrence at the Climate Engineering Conference 2014. He states in his opening paragraphs, a third major set of concerns involves developing appropriate and effective global governance for the various steps that might be undertaken for each of the many proposed techniques for modifying the Earth's radiation budget, from research through testing through potential implementation. Now, they talk about transdisciplinarity beyond interdisciplinary action between researchers to incorporate stakeholders. So the whole thing is being done on a massive corporate level. and they always talk about effective global governance. Now, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, I've read their documentation, as you have, and they state these most childish things in these documents. And the most ridiculous one is that the sun does not drive climate change, according to them.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. The sun drives climate.
That's exactly right. And we have people in this country like Piers Corbyn, who I talk to regularly, and his weather forecasts are uncannily more accurate than the Met Office is. And he brings this up all the time, that they say that the sun does not drive the climate change. Now, they will not take into account what the sun is doing as part of global climate change, yet they are actually geoengineering the planet on the back of reducing the amount of sunlight coming in and the radiation of the sun. The whole thing's totally hypocritical and doesn't make any sense.
That's correct. And, we've seen over a 20% reduction in the sunlight reaching the Earth. And I believe it's the past 20 years. I have to study up on my research. So why would solar radiation management mitigate global warming if the sun doesn't drive climate? And I'll tell you what, I am in Chicago this winter. This is my first winter in a very long time. And in our part of the hemisphere, we're further away from the sun. Hence, it's the winter solstice. And guess what? There's snow on the ground. When the summer solstice comes here in Chicago, it's warm. It's 80-some degrees most days during the summer here. So, it all does have to do with the distance, and I'm sure there are a number of factors there. But yes, when the bottom line is this: when there's a lie, and there's an agenda, you're going to find holes in the story. You're going to find holes in the story. And, it's a shame because most people are concerned about the planet. So we have had, again, this issue of climate change being broadcast, on the airwaves, reaching billions of people a day. And it's called programming. That's why they call television programming, because it programs people for their talking points, for their behavior, what they're concerned about, and other things. I do not watch television, and I will not watch television because it's the most damaging opiate or drug on the planet. People that do, again, their talking points, their belief systems, their thoughts are programmed in by that TV. And one of the things that has been programmed into the public is this climate change or this global warming issue. And it has agenda written all over it. Now, don't get me wrong. I am very supportive of reducing pollutants. And, our planet has been damaged largely by, I believe, combustibles and a lot of other things. But the very people, let me make this clear, the very people who have this agenda to create global governance, who have all of the money and power, let me tell you something. They had technologies available over 100 years ago, Tesla technology, which was clean energy. They had it a long time ago. So if they are so concerned about this issue of combustibles, why didn't they initiate these things? And it was about money and power. That's why.
Absolutely.
It's about money and power.
Yeah. They couldn't put a meter on it and regulate it. Now, it's very interesting what you said about television. The BBC are the biggest propaganda arm of climate change in this country. What comes out of them is absolutely ridiculous. They never back anything up with facts, and it's a consensus. This is what the word we hear all the time at these conferences and with change agents and with the whole Agenda 21 is consensus. They have to arrive at this consensus, which doesn't mean everyone agrees. It means that everyone's made to agree. So we're getting something rammed down our throats, which is not based on any science whatsoever. And when people go and stand up against the BBC, they get shouted down as conspiracy theorists. It's absolutely disgraceful. And you're absolutely right. I haven't watched television for years. And when I do, I'm very, very surprised at how dumbed down it is. It's even more dumbed down than I could possibly have imagined. And especially what passes for news reports.
That's right. That's right. But it's very effective. So the media is required to pass through certain agendas. And this agenda is not in the best interest of people. It's interesting because we spoke of Stephen Schneider. He became the leading person in terms of beating the CO2 global warming drum. Stephen Schneider publicly in writing, which I have, and perhaps I should post this on my Facebook. He had gone on a campaign to belittle anybody who disagreed and urged other scientists, to do this, who disagreed with this global warming agenda. So we saw this very oppressive. Any scientists that came up and questioned it, they got destroyed publicly by the media. And these people had the power of the media, because the media, the people who own, 7 families who own the media, all benefit from this consolidation of power. So let me tell you, they are definitely involved with this. But it was interesting because we saw the same component come into the chemtrail geoengineering movement. I was a target, Max Bliss was a target, and a number of other activists, very well-meaning. Anybody that came up and questioned this agenda of global warming, they got publicly attacked on another activist website. Unfortunately, I had promoted this website on both films. We trusted this person. It was based on the agreement that we wouldn't even go into the global warming issue. And he agreed to that. When I wouldn't go along with it, he put all of these character assassinations against me, and really incredible activists, other very well-meaning activists, people who have done a lot of work. And I think the agenda was the same tactic that Schneider used. If anybody questioned this, publicly ridicule them, destroy their career, get them out of the picture. And they were very effective at doing that. And then it creates fear. So any, scientist now that questions this, they're going to lose their job. But the same thing entered in. Any activist that questioned this, they get attacked publicly by another quote unquote leading activist. And I believe it was to put a fear factor into the movement so that people wouldn't do things like Max Bliss. Max Bliss is going to these climate meetings. He's addressing this issue, and I think it's the key. And I'll tell you why, because I don't think geoengineers are really concerned so much about people becoming aware of this. Right now, they're concerned about their agenda, and that's to create global government legislation, making these programs illegal. And if they do it, it's very challenging to reverse. And they know that. So when these treaties are made, if they can get that in, boom, then the veil's going to be lifted. They're going to say, yes, we've been doing this, and then move forward with their campaign of telling us how good the planet is because they're, putting these chemicals into the sky. But I think that's the key. And I've spoken on a couple radio shows, and I started bringing up climate change or the fact that us as activists should be going to these climate meetings. We should be speaking, just as Max did, at these meetings. And he said, whoa, you can't go there. It's going to create division in the movement. Let me tell you something. The division's there. We didn't bring it. One person brought it. And it was based on this very factor. So I look at things when there's a continuous, activity of one person who's continuously putting other people down and trying to destroy their credibility. I look at that and I say, wait a minute, what's the agenda here? Maybe we should be going in the direction that, appears to be withheld from that. And that's what I think it is, because in 2015, this year, there are 500 climate laws scheduled to go into effect. And these are scheduled to go into effect. I believe they're UN-based. So once they establish this and they strip away the sovereignty from the counties, the states, and even the countries, these climate laws look good. Based on what I've seen, I would support them because a lot of them are about reducing pollution, reducing emissions, and I'm all supportive of that. I'm an environmentalist. But once they come in, then incrementally they bring in the oppressive things because they have already gotten these laws in. They strip the local governments of their sovereignty, and then boom, they come in with cap and trade. Boom, they come in, with taxing us on this, things that are not beneficial to the American public or anybody for that matter. And so it's an incrementalization. So the laws look good, people accept them, but then they have their tentacles into the government, and then they come in with the heavy hitting. And I think that's where we're going. And I think largely the chemtrail movement has become impotent because it wasn't effectively addressing this connection between global warming, the deliberate melting of the Arctic. And that's why I wrote that article. And I think it's the key to this whole movement. And I think it's the key to stopping geoengineering. And again, I can't stress to people how much, geoengineering, they're trying to pass laws because they're sourcing Arctic melt as being the cause of CO2 global warming. So the next thing to do is legalizing geoengineering. We have to address this. We have to get to the meetings. It's absolutely essential. So let's do it.
I agree entirely. That is the way to go, and progress has been made. When these laws come in, we know what they're going to do. They're going to say, of course, and carbon dioxide is the biggest pollutant, and that's what we've got to stop. I mean, these so-called environmental laws are already having a massive impact through Agenda 21 locally. I cover it on this show, and I talk about it a lot. Agenda 21 and what they're doing, they're bringing in schemes to get everyone off the road, onto private transport, and to take private property. And the UN have the ability under their own agenda, their own convention on privileges and immunities of the specialized agencies of the UN. They have that ability. Basically, they are beyond the law, and all this is being implemented by them, because we've got to remember that the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the World Health Organization, the Universal Postal Union, the International Telecommunication Union, and any other agency in relationship to the United Nations, in accordance with Articles 57 and 63 of the Charter. And it basically makes them immune. Now, these programs are coming down through the UN, and it was interesting what you said about California and how California's been decimated. I talk to Deborah Tavares regularly and people in California, and California's been really, really badly hit. And this is really where to go with it. I think it's the economic side of it, and all the other spin-offs that this geoengineering program is having, along with Agenda 21. And it's best to, I think, maybe to talk about it as a whole. It's the problem is that it's such a massive thing that it's hard to get into. But I think it's at a kind of as an entry level, it's very important to talk about what's happening to people locally. With the way Agenda 21 is being done to take away their property rights, the sustainable development housing, the taking away of their rights of transport, then it's good to get onto the geoengineering, I find, because some people still look up and go, they wouldn't do that. Well, we know they would, but it's sometimes hard to get that one across straight away, I find.
I found that was funny. Yeah. I have to laugh. Yeah, people say they wouldn't do that. Well, you bet. What I tend to say to people is, perhaps you meant to say, I wouldn't do that because you're a good person.
Exactly.
However, don't confuse everybody else, because we have some very, very serious things going on. We have, people torturing people. We have people molesting children. Of course, I would never do that, and most people wouldn't. However, there are people that do it. So let's not be naive to this. You better believe people would do it. And for the monetary and political agenda, however, I think the way that we address this issue is very important, and our approach, has to be essential. And I've done a lot of street activism. I hit the streets and I have a DVD burner, so I'm always burning DVDs and handing them out. Seeing people run around like Chicken Little. The sky is falling, the earth is burning, and people are like, wait a minute, whoa, that's a little too far out there. But sometimes my activism, the most effective activism, is where I speak a little less. And sometimes I tell people, I say, hey, man, it's cold today, isn't it? You've noticed it's cold. You've noticed the weather's changing, right? The people say, yeah. I said, you know what? I have this film, it sounds a little weird, but those lines, those airplanes in the sky, they say they're impacting our weather. Just check out this film really quick, and I hand it to them. I walk away. Some people I never see again. Other people are like, oh, my God, now I totally get what you're talking about. So, again, sometimes there's a lot of information, and we're all passionate about this issue, especially those of us who recognize how serious it is. But sometimes saying a little bit less is more effective until, the door gets opened up. Then you can talk about some of the deeper things. But this issue is far out. If you haven't been awakened to it, it is very hard and very challenging for people to grasp because of that. Most of us would never even think being a part of something like this. And I think that's where the gap, is. So DVDs, a great tool. There are a lot of very effective. If you go to the Global March Against Chemtrails and Geoengineering, go to Bye Bye Blue Sky on Facebook, a couple of new sites that have come up. And I believe they have a lot of very good flyers, and they've been doing a lot of very good work.
It's interesting, the first show I ever did for the People's Voice TV, Windows on the World, which we're still doing now, the show goes out every week, and it was about chemtrails. Max came all the way over from France. We had a very good show, and we covered a kind of demonstration outside Downing Street against geoengineering, and we found a lot of the public were very switched on about it or receptive to it. They knew basically that this kind of weather modification had been going on, and they weren't closed-minded to it. We even talked to a pilot who was actually scared about losing his job, so there was quite a lot of awareness. But this has been ramped up with Max going to this geoengineering conference, and with your work and with the rest of the work around the world that's being done. We know that we're all going to get divided and ruled over a lot of this stuff, but really the issues remain the same. This program is ongoing. It's corporate. It's massive. There is a bigger awareness of this now. So in concluding this interview for today, Michael, what would you like to say? Where are things going? What do you think people should be doing?
Well, I think we should look inside and find out what our gifts are. So I'm working on putting together a seminar, which will be in California, and it's going to be an activism seminar. And I really think, we're very close to critical mass. And once we hit that number, and I think we're a month or two away from it probably, once we hit it, the dynamics are going to change. And when there is public awareness, not only do our political officials have to address it, as we've seen in certain areas, but we then have power. And then we have the ability to do something. So again, let's become aware. Let's utilize the resources that we have, the films and literature and articles. Let's get this out to our social networking. Let's get this out to our email list. But more than that, let's go out to town hall meetings. Let's hand out DVDs. Let's start speaking about this wherever and whenever we can. And bottom line is this: we have a number of people. Lexi Hunter, is taking legal action about this. She can be contacted if you're interested in that. Look up Lexi Hunter, and I believe I don't have her contact information right now, but I'm sure that you can find it. The question, I think, is what can't we do? Because there are thousands of things that we can do. So I urge people to, again, find out what their gifts are and move forward in those. For me, I'm planning on making a third film. This is going to relate the Arctic ice melting with geoengineering, how that relates to climate change. I have a lot of amazing documentation. If you want to get involved with that, go to truthmediaproductions.us or whyintheworldaretheyspraying.com and send me an email. Because we definitely need some funding to move forward with that. And I'm going to put together a funding campaign. And that's probably going to be the third and final film. And I think it's what we need to stop these programs. I want to encourage everybody out there, some people oftentimes feel helpless about this. No. That we have such an incredible opportunity. We are so close in reaching critical mass. And when we do, we will reverse these programs. We will allow the planet to restore, to rebalance, and we will have an incredible future. But we have to just work a little bit harder for a short period of time till we reach our objectives, and we will get these programs stopped.
I think that's a very good place to leave it, Michael, and there is a lot of empowerment going on. I think that a lot of these people are getting a little bit scared now, and we will see them running for cover. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when the lid finally gets taken off this, because there are so many people depending for their jobs, their livelihoods, and in actual fact, the whole global deception is run around the climate change, global warming debate at the moment. So thanks very much for your time. It's great to catch up with you at last. I mean, it's a year later, but in a way that's a good thing.
Yes,
because I've had a year to think about it, and some of the information you've given today has been incredible. So thank you, Michael J. Murphy, for joining us on Windows on the World.
Thank you very much, Mark. And as always, keep looking up.
Thanks for joining us on Windows on the World. Remember, keep watching those, watching us, watching Windows on the World. We'll see you soon.